How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf. Why am I looking at my watch? I should look at the Gemara. Daf Nun Beis. Daf 52 of Masechta Nazir. Babylon. Friends, today we talk about heads and skeletons? No. Backbone thingies? Vertebrae thingies? Skeleton, backbone, vertebrae thingies? Vertebrae? Skeleton is the head. Spinal column thing? Spinal thing? Spine? Got it. Spine. That's nice. Spine. That's a nice word. Alright. Skulls and spines. Oh yeah, friends, what do you want me to tell you? I didn't write the book, I just read it. Okay, skulls and spines. Alright. Well, we're going to start in Daf Nun Beis and Aleph, about 10 lines in. HaShedra v'Agulgolis, the spine and the skull. Yibailu Shedra v'Agulgolis nan o Dilma o Shedra o Gulgolis. And this is the topic, the focus of our Daf, that when the Mishnah says that a Nazir needs to start over for Shedra v'Gulgolis, does that mean a spine and a skull that are connected, zusammen, together? Or is it talking about even a skull on its own or a spine on its own? That's the shaylet. Amar Rava says, Rava Tashma Kaminir Shedra Shegered Rov Ilin Sheba Tehora. That a spine, that most of the ribs, I didn't actually look this up. Sharna, are the ribs connected to the spine? Is that how it goes? Wait, actually, one second. I have a spine. One second. Here's my spine. Where are my ribs? Here are my ribs. Okay. So if I follow them all the way back, okay, I feel like these are still my ribs. Still my ribs. What the heck is that? Yeah, I guess I'm not so good at this stuff. Alright. Well, alright. Well, I guess let's say that the ribs are connected to the I guess let's say that the ribs are connected to the spine. Alright, that sounds good. So if you have a spine and the ribs are they're like broken, tahora, so it is pure. Alright. Uva kever afilu mishuberes or mefarekes tmeya. But in a kever, in a grave, then even if they're broken and stuff, then it's still tamei pnei kever. Alright, because it's like in a grave. So we're saying it's only not tamei because the ribs are broken. But if the ribs weren't broken, then it would be tamei. So we see that even the spine alone would be tamei as long as the ribs are still connected. So we see o shedra o gulgolis katani. So it's either the spine or the skull. Ha lo katani. One second, but it didn't say that. It didn't say ha lo gered. It didn't say that explicitly. Look, all it's saying is, look, we know for sure that if the ribs are disconnected or broken, so then it won't be tamei. But if they're connected, then the ma'aseh we don't know. It's a kasha. Tashma, come in here. Reb Yehuda Omer says Reb Yehuda. Tashma, Reb Yehuda Omer says Reb Yehuda. Shisha dvarim abakive mitayim v'chacham mitayrin v'chazu b'Rabakiva. Ha. That there are 6 inyanim that Rabbi Akiva said was tamei. The chacham said are tahor, and Rabbi Akiva, went back. He threw in he raised the white flag. He said, all right, okay, I don't think it's tamei. Fine. Okay. Fine. Umaise, and there was a story. There was a story that they brought a box full of bones to the synagogue of the coppersmiths. Friends, were you ever in synagogue and they brought a box full of bones? And they left it in an open space that it wouldn't be tumas ha'ol. V'nichnas Tudus harofe v'chol harofim imo. Tudus, the doctor, came, and all the doctors with him. V'amru, and they said, Ein kan shedra mimeis echod, that here there is not a spine, right? He gave his expert medical opinion that this is not a spine from one individual. Time dileka shedra demechada haika o shedra o gogolis demechada noz megaleach oleh shmamina o shedra o gogolis tanan. So we see from the fact that Tudus, the doctor, said that there is not a spine from one corpse, from one mace, so implying that that's why it's not tameh. But if there was a spine from one body, so then it would be tameh. So we see that a spine alone is enough. Lo mibaya ka'amar, to which we say no. It's lo mibaya shedra v'golgolis d'mimeis echad leka. No, what he's saying is, look, I can tell you that 100%, there is no spine from one mace. Ella afilu o shedra Ella, meaning not only is there not a spine from one mace, Ella afilu o shedra mimeis echad o golgolis mimeis echad leka. Right? It's not only that that we don't have a full spine from one mace, but we don't even have a spine or a wait, what? No, wait, what? I'm butchering this. I'm butchering like this butchered up fellows, all these bones. Okay. Lo mibaya kamer. What Tudus Harofe was saying was, not only lo mibaya shedra vigul goles d'mimeis echad leka, not only do we not have a spine and a skull from one body, ela afilu o shedra mimeis echad o gul goles mimeis echad leka. We don't even have either or, right? We definitely don't have a spine and a skull from one body, but we don't even have either a spine or a skull from one body. That's what it was talking about, but it could be that the spine and the skull is really what we're after. Toshma. So we try to bring a proof miminyana from the count, right? We had said there were 6 instances where Rabbi Akiva says that something was tamei and the Chacham said that something was tahor. So from the fact that it specifically listed 6 instances, so we could try to figure out if it's either or if it's a combination of the spine and the skull based on if we identify what these 6 things are, then we can basically count them up and try to figure it out that way. Let's see what that means. It means, al ever min ha-meis, sheba mishnei meisim. So if you have a limb from a corpse, but if you have like an arm, but it's the arm isn't just from one corpse, it's like 2 half arms that you're putting together from 2 different corpses, like a Frankenstein situation. Or if you have 2 live people, and you have like part of the arm from each one of them, and you put them together. Or if you have half of a kav of bones, but they come from 2 different bodies, dead people, corpse things. Ve'al reviz dam abba mishnayim, or a revius of blood that comes from 2 corpses. Val etzim kisayr shenechel l'shnayim, or a bone the size of a barley kernel that was split in half. Ve'ashedra v'agogolis, and the spine and the skull. V'sagadaytech o shedra o gogoles ani shiva avyon da 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 da. So we want to say that, well, from the fact that we know that there are 6 places where Rabbi Akiva argues with the Chachamim, and we just listed what the 6 are. And if we would say that the spine and the skull are separate, there would be 7. So it must be that the spine and the skull are a package deal, are together. Kikatane kolecha de plige ole rabim lafuki etzim kisayra de yacharu de polygali, to which the Gemara says lavdavke. You could potentially say that it means either the skull or the spine. And the thing is, we can actually drop one of the others, because when we say 6, it's talking about there are 6 instances where the rabbis, where multiple people argue on Rabbi Akiva, but in one of the cases listed, there's only one person who argues on Rabbi Akiva. In that case is the bone the size of the barley kernel that was split in half. In that case, there's only one person who argues on him. The Tanya is within the price of etzim kisarish nechlak l'shnayim. If you have a bone the size of a barley kernel that was split in half, Rabbi Akiva metame, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri mitaher. Rabbi Akiva says it's tameh, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says it is tahor. So we see that in that case, it's just an individual who's arguing on him. So that is not counted in the 6. Alternatively, ki katani Aver min ames, aver min achai lo katani. Alternatively, we had listed both a limb, a combined limb from a dead person, as well as a combined limb from a live person. So we can say actually that it's really just one of them. We don't list both. We could just list one of them, and it includes both. So then you can drop one of them, and then you can have 6. Even if the skull and the spine are separate. Alternatively, alternatively, when we say 6, we're talking about there are 6 instances where a Nazir needs to start over, he needs to shave and start over for an ohel being in the same structure as it, or making a tent over it. Lafuki etzim kisara dilo, to exclusion of a bone the size of a barley kernel that it's only mitame b'maga umasa, not be'ohel. If you by same alternatively, ki katani kolechet do hader bei, lafugirvi is dam de lo hader bei. Alternatively, we're counting all the cases where Rabbi Akiva changed his mind and actually agreed ultimately with the rabbis, as opposed to the revius of blood, where Rabbi Akiva never changed his mind to agree with the Chacham. Rabbi Akiva always held that a revius of blood that comes from 2 corpses is mitame. To Amar lei Rabbi the Bar Kapore, because Rabbi said to Bar Kapore, lo tishne revius dam b'chazar, do not include the revius of dam in the things that Rabbi Akiva ultimately agreed with the rabbis on. Shari tamudo shel Rabbi Akiva biyado, because Rabbi Akiva always held on to that halacha, to that opinion. For the Mikra Messiah, additionally, the pasuk actually favors Rabbi Akiva's interpretation. I'll call nafshos meis lo yavo, that the pasuk says on multiple nefeshes of the dead you shall not come, meaning that revius of blood can come from multiple corpses. So even the pasuk seems to support Rabbi Akiva's position. Rabbi Shimon Omer says, Rabbi Shimon ad yomov ha'mitame, says Rabbi Shimon that Rabbi Akiva's entire life he would say that a revius of blood from 2 mesim is mitame. Says Rabbi Shimon, seemingly like sarcastically, if maybe he changed his mind after he died, I can't say. To which they said that Rabbi Akiva's teeth became black because he fasted so much, after feeling so terrible for being sarcastic with respect to his Rabbi Akiva, by saying that maybe he changed his mind after he died. Interesting. Tashma, Kominir, the Tanyas, within the Brisa, Beishami Ovim, Rova Atsomis, Mina Atsomim, Omishnaim, Omishlosha, okay, that the majority, that a revius, a quarter of a kav of bones, even if it's just from 2 or 3 bones, would be tameh. Uvesil Omim Rova Minagvia, Meirova Binyan or Meirova Minyan. That and Basil says it has to not just be a quarter of a kav from the bones, but it says Basil it has to be a quarter of a kav from the body. Meirova Binyan or Meirova Minyan. Either the bones have to be most of the bones of the body, or at least most of the numerical amount. If there are 248 bones, so it would have to be, majority of those, right? So either the bones that make up, you can have bigger bones that make up most of the body, or you can have smaller bones, but they would have to be numerically more than 50%. On Rabbi Yeshua, says Rabbi Yeshua, Yecholani lasos divrei Beisham v'divrei Beisil ke'echod, says Rabbi Yeshua that he can shtim Beisham and Beisil. He could show how actually Beisham and Beisil are saying the same thing. That when Beishamai says that you can have this quarter of a kav of bones, even if it's just 2 or 3 bones, because it could be 2 shin bones and a thigh bone. Or maybe 2 thigh bones and a shin bone. That there you can have 2 or 3 bones, and it's actually it's a majority of the body, like Beis Hillel is saying. Migova, right? It's those 3 bones are the majority of the fellow. Beis Hillel omrim, of the height of the fellow. Beis Hillel omrim min agvia omerov minyan. And Beis Hillel says that from the body, whether it's the majority of the size of the body, like we just explained, that it could be just like the thighs and the shins, or mirov minyan, or the majority of the numerical number. So more than I guess if 248 divided by 2 is 124, is that right? So 125, I guess. You can have like the knuckles and stuff of the hands and the feet, that there's a lot of bones there, but it's not necessarily such a large, part of the body. One second. So we can see that, we can argue that maybe Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel Taka actually agree in terms of the bone count and it being a quarter of a kav of bones. Now, here's the part that's relevant for us. Shammai Omer afilu etzem min ashedra o min agulgoles. So now, Shammai says that even if you just have 1 bone from the spine or from the skull, that would be enough. You don't necessarily need the whole spine or the whole skull or anything. So even just 1 bone from the spine or from the skull would be enough to be mitamim. We want to say that from the fact that Beis Shammai is being super machmir, so then we want to say that from the fact that Shammai is being super machmir, that implies that the other opinion would be to be mekil, right? That meaning that if Shammai is saying that even 1 bone from the spine or from the skull would be tameh, well then the other opinion would be to the other extreme, which would be that you would know it's only tameh if you have the entire spine and the entire skull, both of them together. To which we say no. Shiny Shammai demachmir. To which we say no. Don't necessarily go to that extreme. We could just say that Shammai is being particularly stringent, but the other opinion wouldn't be the full spine and the skull. Maybe it's either the spine or the skull, right? So livshod mina time de Beis Shammai de machmir rabbanon adika shedra v'gogoles. Wait, what did I just do? Oh, did I jump the gun? Wait, did I just jump? Excuse me, 1 second. It's a little confusing because there's very little in the Gemara. You have to kind of memorize who's saying what. Okay, fine. So basically, right. So Shammai had said that it's right. It's just 1 bone from the spine or from the skull. So now we want to say that Shammai is being particularly stringent. But livshot mina, let's say the time of the base Shammai de machmir harabanan, but the rabbis would argue and say adika shedra vilgulgolis, right? That it would only be tameh if you have the full spine and the skull. Lo, we say no. Adkan lo pligi rabbanan ole de Shammai ele be'etzem echad dasim min ashedra min agulgolis. We could say no. That fine. I don't even know. Am I missing stuff? I don't even know. Anyways, where am I? So we can say no. The rabbis who argue on Shammai don't necessarily say that you would need to have the entire spine and the skull. It could be actually just either the spine or the skull. Even if you have right, so meaning Shammai had said even just 1 bone from the vertebrae or from the skull would be enough, and they say no, that's a little bit too strict. You don't need both the spine and the skull, but at least it would have to be 1 complete one. Okay, yeah, these dafs are so redunculously technical, and again, there's no Rashi and stuff, so it's just whatevs. We just doing it because we do them all. We do them all. Okay, another technical exploration. Here we go. Rami Bar Chama asks, Rova atzomis min shedra v'gogolis mai. So if you have a revius of bones, and that revius, if you have a quarter of a kav of bones, and that quarter of a kav of bones, so you don't have a full spine and skull, but you have a quarter of a kav of these bones, but they're spine and skull bones as opposed to other bones. What do we say? Kikatani chatzi kav atzomis. When we say in the Mishnah that you would have to, that a Nazir only has to start over for half of a kav of bones, heicha deika mishar evarov. Is that only when it's from other limbs? But when it comes to the spine and the skull, which were more stringent, so even a quarter of a kav of bones would be enough. Or maybe it makes no difference. That even by the spine and the skull, also you'd have to have half of a kav, not just a quarter of a kav. Amarava says, Rava Tashmakum. Here, it says in the Mishnah, the spine and the skull. And if it means a quarter of a kav of bones that comes from the spine and the golgol, so it should say that. And the skull, it should say that. Chomir lisnei al rova atzomis. Wait, what? Chomir is more stringent. So then lesni al rova atzomis. The Mishnah should say on a quarter of a, meaning in general it would have to be a half a kav of bones, but if it's a quarter of a kav of bones from the spine and the skull, well then that would already be tameh. But I thought that Rava holds that the spine and the skull doesn't necessarily even have a quarter of a kav of bones. So Basu the Shamar Rabbi Akiva. Oh yeah, after he heard from Rabbi Akiva that the spine and the skull isn't necessarily a quarter of a kav of bones, so then that's when he said that the spine and a skull might not actually have a quarter of a kav of bones. Tashma Kamanir Shammai Omer says Shammai Etzim Echom and Shedra Om Gogolos. Oh, so here it gets confusing again a little bit. Maybe I'll get it right. That Shammai said that if you have a one bone from the vertebrae or from the skull, so Shammai de Machmir Tvei. We want to say, okay, so Shammai is particularly stringent. Livshot mina time of the Shammai Machmir al Rabbanan Adika Chatzi Kav Atzomis. So let's say that Shammai is being stringent, and the rabbis are saying that, so Shammai is being particularly stringent, but the rabbis are saying that there has to be a half of a kav of these bones. But maybe the rabbis just argue with Shammai, that Shammai says, look, it's just one bone is enough to be tamei, but maybe the rabbis would say, look, we're not being extremely lenient, but it would have to be at least a quarter of a kav. You don't need to have a half a kav. No, wait, what? Right, exactly. So we're not being super lenient to say that it has to be half a kav. We're saying a quarter kav, but Shammai is a little bit much by saying just like one vertebrae. That's a little bit extreme. Omer Eliezer says, Rabbi Eliezer, that so the earlier elders would say, right? So some of them would say that when we're talking about half of a kav of bones and half of a log of blood, and that was for all tumas maces. Rova atzomas revi'is dam lo lechol, and a quarter of a kav of bones and a quarter of a log of blood is not for any of the tumas maces. Some of them would say af rova atzomas revi'is dam lechol, that even a quarter of a kav of bones and a quarter of a log of blood was for everything, all tumas maces. Bezdin shalacharei mamru, but later Bezdin said chatzi kav atzomas v'chatzi log dam. When it comes to half of a kav of bones and half of a log of blood, lakol. So that is for all tumas maces. But rova atzomas revi'is dam, when it comes to a quarter of a kav of bones and a quarter of a log of blood, that's for specific things, the truma v'kodshim. That's for truma and kodshim. Avalo le-nazir v'ose pesach, but not for a nazir and an ose pesach. So in that case, it would, right? So by nazir, it would not be a quarter of a kav, it would be half of a kav, like we saw in our Mishnah. Michdei en achras shlishis machras. I don't understand. We have three separate opinions. How did we settle on the fact that it's the final opinion that we go with, that it's half a kav? So Amar Yaakov Bar Idi, Mipi Shmuel Amru, Mipi Chagai Zcharia Malachi. Well, it comes from Chagai, Zcharia, and Malachi. Of course, I have an almost kind of cousin named Malachi. We heard from them, Chagai, Zcharia, and Malachi, that it's a half of a kav for the bones for a Nazir to have to start over. Peace out.